As a doctor, I have listened to many heartbeats, not just the ones we hear through a stethoscope, but the quiet, trembling heartbeats of women carrying fear, hope, and unanswered questions deep inside them. Pregnancy is often spoken of as a time of joy, yet behind many smiles are stories rarely told, stories of fear, pain, and silent strength. Today, I am honored to introduce a woman whose journey reflects the hidden side of motherhood, a real story born not from perfection, but from courage. Her story is not wrapped in fairy tales. It is wrapped in truth, truth that many women live every day but struggle to speak aloud. She will take you into moments filled with uncertainty, nights heavy with worry, and decisions that changed her life forever. You will hear about fear that crept in quietly, trauma that tested her spirit, and a strength she never knew she possessed. This is not just a pregnancy story, it is a human story, a motherhood story, and a reminder that behind every expectant mother is a warrior fighting battles unseen. As you listen, I invite you to open your heart. Some parts may move you, some may surprise you, and some may stay with you long after this story ends. What you are about to hear is real, raw, and deeply personal. This is Pregnancy Fears and Trauma, a real motherhood story. And now, before we listen to her lovely and heartfelt story, please, if you have not subscribed to this channel now, leave whatever you're doing right now and like, share, subscribe, and comment on this channel to enable us get feedback from you and improve our communication and interaction with you as we prepare our subsequent episodes. Please press the subscription button now. Okay, now let us hear from the couple Carol and Danny Johnson.
I knew something had changed before the test said anything. My body felt heavier, my thoughts felt louder, and fear sat with me even when I tried to sleep. When the two lines appeared, my hands shook. I stared at them for a long time, hoping they would fade. They did not. I sat on the bathroom floor, cold tiles under my feet, and felt my heart beat like it wanted to run away. I was married. I was supposed to be happy. But happiness did not come. What came was silence. I did not tell my husband that night. I lay beside him and listened to his breathing. Each breath felt like time passing without my permission. I wondered how something so small could already feel so heavy. Pregnancy changed me quickly. My body was no longer my own. My stomach turned at smells I once loved. My head ached. My chest felt tight. But the hardest part was inside my mind. Thoughts came like storms. Will I survive this? Will my marriage survive this? Will I be enough? People told me, "You glow." They did not see me crying in the bathroom. They did not hear the questions that kept me awake. My husband tried. I know he did. But sometimes love feels far when fear is close. He asked if I was okay. I said yes because I did not know how to explain the darkness growing in me. How do you tell someone that carrying life feels like carrying a secret pain? As my belly grew, so did the pressure. Everyone had expectations. His mother talked about names. My friends talked about baby clothes. The church talked about blessings. No one asked how I was feeling inside. They expected joy. I gave them smiles. They expected strength. I gave them silence. At night, when the house was quiet, my thoughts became loud. I imagined everything going wrong. I imagined losing myself. I imagined losing him. Sometimes I imagined disappearing, just to rest from the weight of being the expectant. Money became another fear. Every bill felt like a threat. Every plan felt uncertain. My husband counted numbers at the table. I watched his face grow tired. I wanted to help, but my body was tired too. Guilt joined fear. I felt like a burden. I felt like a problem growing day by day. We argued over small things. Food, noise, words said the wrong way. Once, he raised his voice, not in anger, but in exhaustion. I cried for hours after that, not because of what he said, but because I understood. We were both scared. We were both pretending. There were days I did not recognize myself. I would sit alone and talk to the baby, not with love, but with fear. What did you come to change? What will you take from me? Then guilt would rush in. I was ashamed of my thoughts. Mothers are not supposed to think like this. Wives are not supposed to feel this weak. So I hid it. I became very good at hiding. One night, the pain was too much, not in my body, but in my chest. I could not breathe properly. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. My husband slept beside me, unaware. I almost woke him, almost, but I stopped. That was when I realized something dark. Even in marriage, a woman can be deeply alone. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I cried without sound. I looked at myself in the mirror and did not recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were tired. Her smile was gone. She was carrying life, but she felt close to breaking. The suspense lived in waiting. Waiting for the next doctor visit, waiting for the next bill, waiting for my emotions to calm down, waiting for myself to return. Sometimes I wondered if something bad would happen just to end the waiting. The thought scared me, but it was honest. Waiting can be cruel. Yet in the darkness, small moments surprised me. One evening, my husband sat beside me without speaking. He placed his hand on my belly and stayed there. No advice, no questions, just presence. I cried quietly, and he did not ask why. That moment saved something inside me. I learned that love does not always speak. Sometimes it waits with you. Still, the trauma stayed. Pregnancy was not just about a baby. It was about facing every fear I had avoided. Fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of becoming someone I did not know. I was not just expecting a child. I was expecting pain, change, and a version of myself I had not met. As the final months came closer, the suspense grew stronger. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I could not see. I did not know what waited for me on the other side. All I knew was that I could not turn back. Some nights, I placed my hands on my belly and whispered, "I am scared." That was my truth. This is what it means to be expectant. Not just waiting for birth, but waiting through fear, through pressure, through silent trauma, and still standing, even when no one sees it. The change did not arrive loudly. It came slowly, like a shadow that grows longer without asking permission. My body began to feel unfamiliar. I would wake up tired even after sleeping. My back ached. My legs felt heavy. Simple tasks became difficult. I watched myself move through the day like someone else was living inside my skin. But the deeper change was not in my body. It was in my mind. I became sensitive to everything. Words cut deeper. Silence felt louder. A look, a tone, a small comment could send my thoughts running in dark directions. I questioned myself all the time. Am I doing this right? Am I failing already? I stopped recognizing my emotions. One moment I felt calm. The next I was angry or sad without knowing why. I would cry and not understand the reason. The tears came on their own, and I hated myself for them. I felt weak. I felt broken. People called it hormones. They said it like it was small, but it did not feel small to me. I felt watched. Every move I made seemed to belong to someone else now. What I ate, how I slept, how I walked, everyone had an opinion. Everyone knew what was best for me. My body was no longer private. It had become a public discussion. I smiled when they spoke. inside, I wanted to scream. I missed my old self, the woman who laughed easily, the woman who did not fear her own thoughts. I felt like she was slipping away, and I did not know how to hold her. There were days I felt angry at my own body. It refused to obey me. It demanded rest when life demanded effort. It changed shape without asking me. I would stand in front of the mirror and stare at my growing stomach. Sometimes I placed my hand there with care. Other times I pulled my clothes tight and turned away. Love and resentment lived side by side inside me, and that scared me. How could I feel both? My husband noticed the change before I admitted it. "You are quiet," he said once. I wanted to tell him that my mind was loud, that fear had moved in and made itself comfortable, but the words stayed trapped inside my chest. I was afraid he would not understand. I was afraid he would try to fix something I could not explain. So I nodded and stayed quiet. Sleep became difficult. At night, my body rested, but my thoughts did not. I replayed conversations. I imagined problems that had not happened yet. I prepared for pain that might never come. The darkness of the room made everything feel worse. I listened to my heartbeat and wondered if the baby heard it too. I wondered if my fear was passing into this new life growing inside me. That thought haunted me. The change was not just emotional. It was spiritual. I questioned everything I believed. I prayed more, but with less confidence. My prayers were no longer neat or hopeful. They were desperate, broken sentences, long silences, sometimes anger. I asked God why this journey felt so heavy, why becoming a mother felt like losing parts of myself, why strength felt so far away. No answers came, only waiting. This was the change no one prepared me for. Pregnancy did not just grow a child in me, it stripped me open. It exposed every fear I had hidden. It forced me to meet myself in ways I was not ready for. I was becoming someone new, but the process hurt, and I was still afraid of who I was turning into. The change did not happen all at once. It crept in quietly, like something alive, settling into my bones before I noticed it was there. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just tiredness, just mood, just pregnancy doing what pregnancy does. But soon I realized I was not just carrying a child, I was carrying a version of myself I did not recognize. My body felt like a place I was visiting, not living in. I woke up with pain in places I could not explain. My chest felt heavy, my head slow. Even breathing sometimes felt like work. I moved carefully, afraid that one wrong step would break something inside me. And yet, people looked at me and smiled. They saw a woman becoming a mother. I felt like a woman disappearing. My emotions became unpredictable. I could be calm one moment and overwhelmed the next. A simple sound could irritate me. A careless word could ruin my entire day. I became ashamed of how easily I broke down. I began to police my own feelings, forcing smiles when I wanted to cry, swallowing anger because it felt unacceptable. I told myself, other women do this every day. Why can't you handle it? That thought became a quiet punishment. I grew distant from people, even from those I loved. Talking felt exhausting. Explaining felt impossible. When people asked how I was doing, I learned to answer quickly. "I'm fine." It was easier than opening a door I did not know how to close again. Inside, I was not fine. I felt alone in crowded rooms. I felt misunderstood even when surrounded by care. Everyone spoke to me about the baby. No one spoke to me about me. I became aware of eyes. eyes that watched what I ate, eyes that judged how I sat, eyes that followed the size of my stomach. My body was no longer just mine. It was measured, discussed, and commented on. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like my privacy had been taken without my consent. Some days I wanted to hide. Other days I wanted to shout that I was still a person, not just a vessel. There were moments when I felt anger toward the baby growing inside me. The thought scared me. I loved this child, but I also felt trapped by it. I felt guilty for wanting my old life back. I felt guilty for missing my freedom. I felt guilty for wishing time would move faster or sometimes stop. Guilt followed every feeling I had. It sat beside me when I ate. It lay with me when I slept. It whispered that I was failing before I even began. My husband tried to understand, but I could feel the gap growing between us. He asked practical questions. I was drowning in emotional ones. He spoke about plans. I worried about survival. We were standing in the same place, but looking in different directions. I wanted comfort, not solutions. I wanted to be held, not advised. But I did not know how to ask without sounding weak. Sleep became a battleground. My body needed rest, but my mind refused it. Night after night, I lay awake staring into darkness filled with thoughts. Fear took shape in that darkness. Fear of childbirth, fear of losing myself, fear of becoming a mother who was already broken. I wondered if something inside me was wrong. Was I ungrateful? Was I unstable? Was I alone in this? Spiritually, I felt shaken. The beliefs that once comforted me now felt thin. I prayed, but my faith felt tired. I asked questions I was afraid to hear answers to. I wondered if this suffering had meaning or if it was simply something women were expected to endure quietly. Sometimes I felt close to God. Other times I felt abandoned. That uncertainty scared me more than pain. The change in me was deep and uncomfortable. Pregnancy peeled away my strength and showed me my fear. It forced me to sit with parts of myself I had avoided for years. It slowed me down when the world expected me to keep moving. I was learning that becoming a mother was not just about life beginning, it was also about something ending. And I was still grieving the woman I used to be. I began to notice his silence before he noticed mine. It showed in the way he paused before speaking, as if measuring his words, in the way he sat longer at the table, staring at numbers that did not change no matter how many times he counted them. He was present, yet distant, like a man standing guard over a fire he feared might go out. He did not complain. He did not cry. He did not ask for help. That was his way of being strong. I watched him carry his fear quietly. Every morning he left the house with a steady face and returned with tired eyes. He tried to make jokes, tried to keep things light, but I could hear the strain in his laughter. He wanted to protect me from his worry, the same way I was hiding mine from him. We were both pretending. We were both lonely. I could feel the pressure resting on his shoulders. He was expected to provide, to plan, to be ready. Society did not ask how he felt. It only demanded results. A man is not allowed to be afraid, especially not now, not when a child is coming. Sometimes I saw him rub his temples in silence. Sometimes he sat in the dark without turning on the light. Those moments spoke louder than words. I wanted to reach him, but I did not know how. When I asked if he was okay, he said yes, the same way I did. His yes was heavy. It carried everything he did not want to say. I could hear it. I just did not know how to open it without breaking him. So I stayed quiet. There were nights when he held me and his arms felt tight, not with love alone, but with fear. I wondered if he felt trapped the way I did, if he worried about failing me, about failing this child we had not yet met. I wished I could tell him that I did not need perfection. I only needed him, but fear has a way of locking the mouth. Money sat between us like an uninvited guest. He talked about work more often, about overtime, about opportunities. I heard the urgency in his voice. The future had become a list of responsibilities, and he was standing at the top of it alone. I felt guilty watching him carry that weight while my own body struggled. I wanted to help, but my help felt small compared to his burden. That helplessness fed my fear. Sometimes his silence frightened me more than anger would have. Anger could be explained. Silence felt like distance. I worried that he was pulling away, not from love, but from exhaustion. I worried that one day he would break, quietly, the same way he was bending now. And yet, in his silence, there was love. He learned my moods before I spoke. He adjusted without asking. He stayed when it would have been easier to escape into work or distraction. His strength was not loud, but it was steady. I saw it. Even when I was drowning in my own pain, I saw it. This was the silent weight on the man, not spoken, not shared, not praised, a weight carried alone, because that is what he was taught to do. And as I watched him struggle quietly, I realized something painful and true. Pregnancy was testing both of us, just in different ways. I did not understand his burden at first. I was too lost in my own pain to see how heavily the moment sat on him. But as the days passed, his silence began to speak. He moved differently, slower, more careful, like a man afraid of making mistakes that could cost him everything. He listened more than he talked. When he spoke, his words were chosen, trimmed, safe. I could feel the effort it took for him to remain calm. He was carrying fear the way men are taught to carry it, quietly, deep inside, where no one can touch it. I watched how responsibility reshaped him. Before, he laughed freely. Now, laughter came late and left early. His shoulders were tense even when he rested. He checked his phone often, worried about work, money, tomorrow. The future had moved closer, and it was demanding answers. He was no longer just a husband. He was becoming a provider, a protector, a father, all at once, and there was no pause button. People spoke to him differently now. They asked if he was ready, if he had enough money, if he was prepared to be a man. No one asked if he was afraid. I saw how these questions followed him home, how they sat between us at dinner, how they crept into his silence at night. Expectations wrapped around him like chains disguised as advice. There were moments I caught him staring at my stomach, not with joy alone, but with worry. His eyes carried questions he did not voice. I knew he was imagining the future: school fees, hospital bills, sleepless nights, responsibilities that never end. I wanted to tell him that it was okay to be scared, but I had been taught the same lie he had, that fear is weakness. So we suffered quietly side by side. Sometimes his silence hurt me. I mistook it for distance, for lack of care, for emotional absence. I wondered if he was pulling away from me, from us. Those thoughts fed my insecurity and deepened my loneliness. Only later did I realize he was not leaving. He was holding himself together. I noticed how he tried to protect me from the truth. He hid bills. He softened bad news. He smiled when he was tired. He stayed strong when he needed rest. He thought shielding me would make my pain lighter, but protection can also create walls. I felt shut out. He felt alone, and between us grew a quiet misunderstanding neither of us knew how to fix. There were nights when he could not sleep. I felt him shift beside me, restless. I heard him breathe deeply as if fighting something unseen. Once I turned to him in the dark, and for a moment I thought he might speak, but he did not. That silence was heavy with everything he carried. Yet, despite the weight, he stayed. He attended appointments when he could. He listened to doctors with a serious face. He asked questions I did not think of. He learned without complaint. His love showed in action, not words. That's when I understood something important. His strength was not loud, but it was real. The silent weight on the man is rarely seen. It does not cry, it does not shout. It simply presses down day after day. And watching him carry it made me realize that pregnancy was not breaking us separately. It was testing whether we could survive carrying different kinds of pain together. The pressure did not live only in our home. It followed me everywhere. From the moment my pregnancy became known, my body stopped belonging to me. It became news. It became a topic. It became something people felt free to discuss, touch, and judge. Everyone had something to say. Family came first. They spoke with excitement, but their words carried weight. They told me how I should eat, how I should sleep, how I should behave. They compared me to other women who had carried children before me, as if pregnancy was a test I had to pass. Be strong, don't complain, this is what women do. Their voices stayed with me long after they left. Friends meant well, but their expectations hurt in quiet ways. They expected me to be glowing, to be happy, to post smiles and good news. When I spoke about pain or fear, they changed the subject or laughed it away. I learned quickly that sadness made people uncomfortable, so I hid it. Society had its own rules. A pregnant woman must be grateful. A pregnant woman must smile. A pregnant woman must endure. There was no space for confusion, no room for weakness, no permission to say, I am not okay. I felt trapped inside an image I could not live up to. Strangers felt entitled to my body. They commented on my size. Too big, too small, too early, too slow. Each comment landed like a stone on my chest. I smiled politely while shrinking inside. I wondered how something so personal had become so public. Culture added another layer. A good wife must carry pregnancy with grace. A good woman must not disturb her husband. A good mother must suffer quietly. These unspoken rules pressed down on me. I feared being judged more than I feared pain. Shame became another burden I carried daily. Religion spoke of blessing, but often ignored the cost. People said, God has chosen you. They said it like choice meant ease. I nodded, even when faith felt heavy, even when prayer felt unanswered. I felt guilty for struggling with something others called a gift. All these expectations invaded my thoughts. I began to doubt my feelings. I wondered if my pain was real or just weakness. I blamed myself for not fitting into the picture everyone admired. The outside world expected joy. Inside, I was fighting to breathe. At night, when everything was quiet, those voices returned. Family, friends, culture, faith. They echoed in my head, demanding strength I did not have. I realized then that pregnancy was not just about carrying a child, it was about carrying everyone else's expectations, and the weight of them was slowly breaking me. The outside world did not knock before entering my life. It walked in the moment my pregnancy became visible. Once people knew, they felt entitled to me, not to ask, but to tell, not to listen, but to instruct. My experience stopped being personal and became a shared story that everyone wanted to shape. Family expectations came wrapped in love, but love does not always feel gentle. My mother watched me closely, her eyes full of concern and comparison. She told me stories of her own pregnancy, how she worked, suffered, and survived without complaint. Each story felt like a reminder that pain was normal and silence was expected. My in-law spoke with authority. She told me what to eat, how to sit, how to carry myself. When I questioned her, she smiled and said, "This is how we did it." Her words left no space for my feelings. I felt small in those moments, like a child again, like my voice no longer mattered. Extended family made it worse. Aunts, cousins, distant relatives all had advice. Some warned me, some frightened me with stories of difficult births and loss. Others laughed at my fears and told me I was overthinking. Each visit left me drained. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. I nodded until my neck felt stiff. Inside, I was screaming for quiet. Friends expected performance. They expected updates, photos, laughter. They wanted good news, not truth. When I spoke about fear, the room grew awkward. Someone always rushed to fix it with jokes or false hope. I learned that honesty made people uncomfortable, so I hid behind safe answers. I'm fine. I'm managing. It's all good. Lies became my shield. Society watched without mercy. People stared at my body as if it belonged to them. They measured my stomach with their eyes. They judged my walk, my posture, my mood. Even strangers felt free to comment. "You look tired. You should be happy. Enjoy it while it lasts." They did not know how heavy those words were. Culture demanded perfection. A pregnant woman must endure without complaint. A wife must not burden her husband. A good mother must sacrifice without question. These ideas lived deep in my mind, passed down without mercy. I feared being labeled weak more than I feared pain. Shame followed every tear. I blamed myself for struggling with something women had survived for generations. Religion spoke loudly but listened little. People told me pregnancy was a blessing, a reward, a calling. They said God would give me strength, but they did not stay long enough to see my nights of fear, my prayers filled with doubt, my faith cracking under pressure. I felt guilty for questioning God. I felt guilty for feeling broken. The outside expectations began to invade my inner world. I questioned my emotions. I doubted my pain. I wondered if I was ungrateful, dramatic, or weak. Slowly, I stopped trusting myself. That loss was terrifying. At night, when I lay alone with my thoughts, those voices returned. Family, friends, culture, faith. They echoed in my head, demanding strength I did not have. I realized then that pregnancy was not just about carrying a child. It was about carrying everyone else's expectations, and the weight of them was slowly breaking me. Pregnancy was supposed to be a time of hope, but for me, hope felt heavy. Every day, the weight of what was to come pressed on my chest. It wasn't just the physical changes or the emotional storm inside me. It was the future, the unknown, the bills, the responsibilities, the fear of not being enough. Money became a constant shadow. Every time I looked at my husband counting numbers at the table, I felt it pressing down on both of us. He tried to hide it, but I could see it in his eyes. The worry about rent, hospital bills, baby supplies, education, and all the unseen costs no one talks about. I wanted to reassure him, to help, but my own hands felt empty. I had no answers, only fear. And yet, I carried my own weight too. Appointments, vitamins, special foods, and the endless advice that what I did or did not buy mattered. It was like trying to carry two mountains at once, both threatening to crush me. Every day, I imagined the future in ways that made my chest ache. Would we have enough? Would we be ready? Would I be able to give this child the life it deserved? Night after night, I lay awake thinking of everything that could go wrong. What if the baby is sick? What if I can't provide? What if he leaves? Each thought stabbed at me like a warning, reminding me of how fragile life felt. It wasn't just fear, it was terror dressed as responsibility. Sometimes I felt guilty for even feeling this fear. Pregnancy is supposed to be a joy. Everyone says so. But joy felt distant, almost like a memory of someone else's life. I was trapped in worry, counting every coin, calculating every expense, imagining every disaster. I hated that I could not simply celebrate. I hated that my mind could not rest. I hated that fear had become a companion. I noticed my husband growing tired, too. He worked longer hours, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. His silence grew heavier. He would sometimes sit in the living room staring at bills or his laptop, and I could see the weight of the world in his posture. He did not ask for help. He did not complain. He carried it alone, and I carried my fear alone, and the space between us seemed wider every day. And yet, despite all this, there were moments of fragile hope, a small purchase that we managed together, a shared joke about baby names, a quiet plan whispered in the night about how we would face the coming months. These moments were fleeting, but they reminded us that we were not alone. We were scared, yes, but we were together in that fear. Financial and future worries were more than numbers. They were silent storms in my chest. They were shadows following every thought, every worry, and they reminded me that pregnancy is not just about growing life in my body. It's about carrying the unknown, the responsibility, and the fear of failing before the child even took its first breath. Pregnancy is supposed to be a time of hope, a time of preparing for the future with excitement. But for me, hope had become a heavy, almost suffocating burden. The future felt like a dark tunnel, and every step I imagined only made my chest tighten. It wasn't just the changes in my body and the storm of emotions swirling inside me. It was the constant, unrelenting fear of what was to come. Money became a shadow I could not escape. Every day I watched my husband with quiet anxiety. He sat at the table, counting bills, checking his accounts, calculating expenses I could barely understand. I could see the lines of worry etched into his forehead, the way his hands trembled slightly when he reached for a pen. He tried to hide it from me, tried to smile and joke, but I knew. I always knew. I wanted to take some of the weight off his shoulders. I wanted to say, I can help, we can manage. But how could I? I had no answers, no solutions, only fear. And sometimes I felt ashamed of that fear because I wanted to be strong for him just as he was trying to be strong for me. Every decision became a source of anxiety. What groceries to buy, which prenatal vitamins were worth the cost, how much to spend on clothes, on baby items, on the hospital. Every purchase, every choice felt like it carried the power to make or break us. I began to measure everything, money, food, time, energy, as if one wrong move would topple the fragile balance we were clinging to. Even the smallest expense felt like a test. Could we afford it? Should we afford it? And if we did, would it be enough? The future loomed like a storm. At night, I lay awake, my mind racing through endless scenarios. What if the baby was sick? What if complications came? What if something went wrong during delivery? What if we could not provide enough? What if I failed as a mother? These thoughts were relentless. They came in waves, crushing me in the silence of our bedroom while he slept beside me, unaware of the battles raging in my mind. Guilt became another shadow. I hated that I could not simply feel joy. I hated that measured every moment through the lens of worry. I hated that fear had taken residence in my chest, and yet I could not evict it. I felt ungrateful for the life growing inside me. I felt like I was failing before I had even begun. I also hated that I saw my husband's exhaustion mirrored in my own despair. He worked longer hours, took on extra shifts, sacrificed rest and sleep to prepare for a future none of us could predict. I wanted to tell him it was enough, but my voice caught in my throat, and sometimes it felt as though we were carrying separate burdens, heavy and unspoken, side by side but alone. Even small victories felt like fragile islands. There were moments of fragile hope, a small bill paid on time, a successful shopping trip where we stretched our money just enough, a quiet evening when we joked about baby names or laughed at something silly. These moments were fleeting but precious, like tiny lights in the darkness. They reminded us that we were together even when fear tried to pull us apart. Financial and future worries were more than numbers. They were silent storms in my chest. They were the gnawing anxiety that came with every heartbeat, every sigh, every glance at my husband. They were shadows that followed me everywhere, whispering doubts, fears, and worst-case scenarios. They reminded me constantly that pregnancy is not just about growing life in your body. It's about facing the unknown, about carrying responsibility, fear, and hope all at once, about learning to survive in the tension between what is and what might be. And yet, despite all this worry, despite all this fear, I kept moving forward because the child growing inside me did not know about our fears. The child expected life, and so we had to keep trying, one day, one step, one breath at a time. The hardest part was not the pain in my body. It was the distance growing between us, quiet but undeniable. We were together yet apart. Side by side on the couch, I would watch him, trying to read the expression on his face, wondering what he was thinking. Sometimes he would ask me a question, but I barely heard it because my mind was full of fear, exhaustion, and worry. Sometimes I answered without really answering, just to keep the peace. And every unanswered thought, every unspoken word widened the space between us. We argued over small things, things that should have been insignificant. A misplaced spoon, a forgotten text, a tone he used that I misread. Each tiny disagreement felt magnified, fuel for tension I did not know how to release. I could see the frustration in his eyes, and I knew he felt the same storm I was feeling, yet we could not meet each other in it. Our words became sharp, even when we did not mean them to be. Silence became heavy, like a wall growing taller every day, and each day I felt a little more alone. I began to fear his reactions, not because he was cruel, no, he was gentle, but he carried so much responsibility, so much worry, so much unspoken fear, that even the smallest sign of my vulnerability seemed like it might break him. So I stopped asking for comfort. I stopped voicing my pain. I stopped hoping that he would understand the storm raging inside me. And yet my longing for connection was unbearable. I wanted him to notice the nights I cried silently in the bathroom. I wanted him to reach out and hold me without words, to tell me it was going to be okay. But I felt like I could not ask for it, because asking felt like weakness, because I worried that admitting how scared I was would add to his burden. The misunderstandings grew quietly. He thought I was distant because I did not trust him. I thought he was distant because he did not care. Neither of us spoke the truth. Neither of us admitted that we were both terrified of the baby, of the future, of losing ourselves in the process. Sometimes our small disagreements left me crying in the bedroom while he sat on the edge of the bed, head in hands, unsure of what to say. We were both broken in different ways, and our love, though present, seemed fragile. Yet, even in the moments of distance, there were glimpses of understanding. He would leave a cup of tea beside me. He would gently touch my shoulder without a word. He would stay silent beside me in the dark. Those small gestures reminded me that we were still a team, even when words failed us, even when the weight of expectation, fear, and uncertainty pressed us apart. I realized then that pregnancy was testing us, not just as individuals, but as a couple. It was showing us how fragile our connection could feel when stress, fear, and expectation collided. It was asking us whether love could survive in silence, whether marriage could endure when two people carried invisible burdens in parallel, never fully meeting in the middle. And in that quiet, dark realization, I understood something painful and raw. Sometimes love is not enough to prevent distance. Sometimes it takes conscious effort, patience, and courage to bridge the gaps fear has carved. But even in our misunderstandings, I still hoped. I hoped that when the baby arrived, when the weight of uncertainty became real life, we would find each other again. Because even in the darkest moments, I knew we were trying, and sometimes trying was the only thing that kept us from breaking completely. The hardest part was not the pain in my body, it was the invisible walls that started to grow between us. We were together, yes, but it felt like we were moving on different planes. I could see him across the room, the same man I had loved, yet somehow a stranger. His eyes were tired in ways I could not fix, his silence louder than any argument. I wanted to speak, to tell him how terrified I felt, but every time I tried, the words stuck in my throat. Every small misunderstanding seemed to swell into something bigger than it should have been. We argued over trivial things at first, a spoon left on the counter, the wrong text message, a question asked in the wrong tone, but each tiny misstep became a spark, igniting frustration that neither of us knew how to handle. I would see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands would fidget. He would see the tears I could not hold back, the tremor in my voice when I tried to speak calmly. Neither of us understood the other. Neither of us knew how to reach across the growing chasm. I began to fear his reactions, not because he was cruel or unkind. No, he was gentle, but he carried so much responsibility, so much worry, so much unspoken fear, that even the smallest sign of my vulnerability seemed like it might break him. So I stopped asking for comfort. I stopped voicing my pain. I stopped hoping that he would understand the storm raging inside me. And yet my longing for connection was unbearable. I wanted him to notice the nights I cried silently in the bathroom. I wanted him to reach out and hold me without words, to tell me it was going to be okay. But I felt like I could not ask for it, because asking felt like weakness, because I worried that admitting how scared I was would add to his burden. The misunderstandings grew quietly. He thought I was distant because I did not trust him. I thought he was distant because he did not care. Neither of us spoke the truth. Neither of us admitted that we were both terrified of the baby, of the future, of losing ourselves in the process. Sometimes our small disagreements left me crying in the bedroom while he sat on the edge of the bed, head in hands, unsure of what to say. We were both broken in different ways, and our love, though present, seemed fragile. Yet, even in the moments of distance, there were glimpses of understanding. He would leave a cup of tea beside me. He would gently touch my shoulder without a word. He would stay silent beside me in the dark. Those small gestures reminded me that we were still a team, even when words failed us, even when the weight of expectation, fear, and uncertainty pressed us apart. I realized then that pregnancy was testing us, not just as individuals, but as a couple. It was showing us how fragile our connection could feel when stress, fear, and expectation collided. It was asking us whether love could survive in silence, whether marriage could endure when two people carried invisible burdens in parallel, never fully meeting in the middle. And in that quiet, dark realization, I understood something painful and raw. Sometimes love is not enough to prevent distance. Sometimes it takes conscious effort, patience, and courage to bridge the gaps fear has carved. But even in our misunderstandings, I still hoped. I hoped that when the baby arrived, when the weight of uncertainty became real life, we would find each other again. Because even in the darkest moments, I knew we were trying, and sometimes trying was the only thing that kept us from breaking completely. The hardest part was not the pain in my body, it was the invisible walls that started to grow between us. We were together, yes, but it felt like we were moving on different planes. I could see him across the room, the same man I had loved, yet somehow a stranger. His eyes were tired in ways I could not fix, his silence louder than any argument. I wanted to speak, to tell him how terrified I felt, but every time I tried, the words stuck in my throat. Every small misunderstanding seemed to swell into something bigger than it should have been. We argued over trivial things at first, a spoon left on the counter, the wrong text message, a question asked in the wrong tone, but each tiny misstep became a spark, igniting frustration that neither of us knew how to handle. I would see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands would fidget. He would see the tears I could not hold back, the tremor in my voice when I tried to speak calmly. Neither of us understood the other. Neither of us knew how to reach across the growing chasm. I began to fear his reactions, not because he was cruel or unkind. No, he was gentle, but he carried so much responsibility, so much worry, so much unspoken fear, that even the smallest sign of my vulnerability seemed like it might break him. So I stopped asking for comfort. I stopped voicing my pain. I stopped hoping that he would understand the storm raging inside me. And yet my longing for connection was unbearable. I wanted him to notice the nights I cried silently in the bathroom. I wanted him to reach out and hold me without words, to tell me it was going to be okay. But I felt like I could not ask for it, because asking felt like weakness, because I worried that admitting how scared I was would add to his burden. The misunderstandings grew quietly. He thought I was distant because I did not trust him. I thought he was distant because he did not care. Neither of us spoke the truth. Neither of us admitted that we were both terrified of the baby, of the future, of losing ourselves in the process. Sometimes our small disagreements left me crying in the bedroom while he sat on the edge of the bed, head in hands, unsure of what to say. We were both broken in different ways, and our love, though present, seemed fragile. Yet even in the moments of distance, there were glimpses of understanding. He would leave a cup of tea beside me. In the middle of all the fear, the arguments, and the silence, there were moments that reminded me why I was holding on. Small, fragile moments, almost invisible, yet more powerful than any words. One evening, I had been crying quietly in the bedroom, my stomach twisting with worry about the future, about money, about whether I could even be the mother I hoped to be. I heard the soft creak of the bedroom door. My husband entered without a word. He didn't ask why I was crying. He didn't offer solutions. He simply sat on the edge of the bed, reached for my hand, and held it. Nothing more, nothing less. And in that silence, I felt seen, truly seen. Not as the pregnant woman everyone expected me to be, not as the wife who had to be strong, not as someone who had to pretend, but as me. There were other moments like this, quiet but profound. Early mornings when he would make tea for me, leaving it beside my chair without a word, knowing I needed comfort more than conversation. Evenings when we would sit together, neither speaking, simply letting the sound of each other's breathing fill the room. Times when he laughed at something small and ridiculous, and I realized that for a brief second we could forget the fear pressing down on us. These moments were fleeting, almost easy to overlook, but they reminded me that connection doesn't always require words. Sometimes presence is enough. Pregnancy had taught me to notice the little things, the subtle ways love could show itself even under the weight of stress. The hand that rubbed my back after a long day, the soft brush of a finger across my forehead, the shared glance across the table when no one else was watching, a silent acknowledgement. We are in this together. It was in these small gestures that I found strength, the courage to keep moving forward, the courage to keep hoping. But connection was fragile, and I had learned to hold it carefully. One night, after another round of tense silence following a disagreement, he came to me quietly. He didn't speak at first. He just wrapped his arms around me, and I felt the tension I had been carrying in my chest slowly start to loosen. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to cry freely, without fear of judgment or misunderstanding. He did not try to fix anything, he simply held me, and in that holding, I understood something profound. Sometimes love is enough. These quiet moments reminded me that pregnancy is not only about fear, struggle, and expectation, it is about discovery, discovery of self, discovery of another, discovery of the fragile but enduring strength of love. Even in the darkest days when fear and worry felt insurmountable, these small connections kept me going. They were anchors in the storm, proof that we could weather the pressure together. And slowly I began to understand that survival was not just about managing the baby, the money, or the expectations. It was about noticing these moments, holding them close, and letting them carry us through the fear. Pregnancy had changed everything about me, my body, my mind, my emotions, but it had also changed my relationship. It had tested it, yes, but it had also deepened it, revealing that even in trauma, even in silence, even in misunderstanding, love could exist quietly, persistently, and powerfully. In those quiet moments of connection, I found hope. Hope that we could survive this. Hope that we could meet again in understanding. Hope that our child would arrive into a space shaped not just by fear and stress, but by love that had endured the storm. Amid the fear, the pressure, and the tension, there were rare moments of connection, moments that felt fragile yet profound. They were almost invisible to anyone else, but to me they were lifelines. I remember one night clearly. I had been crying quietly in the bedroom for what felt like hours, my hands shaking, my chest tight with fear. Fear of the future, fear of the baby, fear of myself. Every worry I had carried in silence seemed to press down on me like a physical weight. I heard the soft creak of the door and felt his presence before I saw him. He didn't speak. He didn't ask me what was wrong. He simply sat on the edge of the bed and reached for my hand. His fingers intertwined with mine, steady and warm. Nothing else was said. No advice, no lecture, just presence. And in that quiet, I felt seen, not as the pregnant woman everyone expected me to be, not as a wife who had to pretend she was strong, but as myself, the real me, trembling, exhausted, afraid, and yet still here. There were other moments, smaller but just as significant. Early mornings when he made tea and left it on the counter beside my chair, knowing I was too tired to move. Evenings when we sat together, neither speaking, just sharing the sound of each other's breathing. Times when he laughed at something ridiculous, and I realized that for a brief second, we could forget all the fear, all the expectations, all the unknowns. I started to notice that love is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet gestures, a hand on my shoulder, a gentle touch on my forehead, a shared glance that says, "I am here, I am with you." Pregnancy taught me to pay attention to these small gestures. The weight of fear could be suffocating, but these tiny anchors of connection reminded me that we were not completely alone in it, that our love could survive the pressure, the arguments, the misunderstandings, that hope could exist even when every day felt heavy. Yet connection was delicate. One evening, after another tense disagreement, I lay on the bed with tears streaming down my face, exhausted from carrying both my body's pain and my mind's fear. He came quietly, wrapped his arms around me, and held me tight. I did not need him to say a word. I didn't want answers or solutions. I just wanted to be held. In his arms, the tension that had been gripping my chest began to loosen. My tears no longer felt like weakness, but release. And in that moment, I understood something I had forgotten. Presence can speak louder than advice. Connection can exist without conversation. Love can be silent but unbreakable. Through these moments, I realized pregnancy was not just about enduring fear or preparing for a child. It was about discovery. Discovery of myself, discovery of my partner, and discovery of the quiet strength that exists when two people navigate hardship together. Even in the darkest moments, small gestures, small acts of care reminded me that we could survive, that we could endure, that hope could persist. Sometimes I would close my eyes and remember the first time he touched my belly, softly, without words. I felt the life growing inside me and the love surrounding it, the invisible thread that connected him, me, and this tiny unknown life. That moment of stillness, of silent understanding, gave me courage to face another day, another fear, another challenge. Pregnancy had stripped me raw. It had revealed every insecurity, every fear, every shadow I carried. But in these quiet moments of connection, I found strength I didn't know existed. A strength that whispered, "We are here. We are together. We will survive this." Even when the world outside demanded perfection, even when expectations pressed down on me like stones, even when the future seemed terrifying, these fleeting moments reminded me that love could endure the pressure, and that connection, however quiet, however small, was enough to keep us moving forward. Pregnancy is supposed to be a beautiful journey, a time of joy, love, and anticipation. But behind closed doors, for me, it was something else entirely, something darker. No one saw the nights I stayed awake, heart racing, stomach tight with anxiety. No one saw the tears I let fall silently in the bathroom, the quiet sobs that left me shaking long after the world had gone to sleep. I carried the weight of fear that I could not share, because even my husband, strong as he was, could not bear all of it. The trauma was subtle, but it ate at me every day. Every appointment reminded me of what could go wrong. Every kick of the baby stirred both awe and panic inside me. I feared every complication, every sudden pain, every unknown. I became hyper-aware of my body. Every ache, every twinge, every flutter was a potential catastrophe. My mind twisted these ordinary signs into warnings, and I felt trapped in a cycle of terror I could not escape. I began to feel disconnected from my own body. It was no longer simply mine. It had betrayed me with exhaustion, nausea, swelling, and pain. It had become something I carried both physically and emotionally, a vessel for life, but also a host for constant fear. I resented it, even as I loved the child growing inside me. I felt guilty for that resentment. I felt guilty for every thought that was not pure joy. The nights were the worst. Silence, instead of being comforting, became suffocating. I would lie awake listening to my husband's breathing, hearing the life he carried in his quiet vigilance, and I realized that we were both drowning in our own ways, both alone in a house full of love, but also full of unspoken fears. Sometimes I imagined leaving, if only to escape the weight pressing down on me, but the thought terrified me even more than the fear itself. I could not abandon the life inside me, nor could I abandon the man who loved me. And so I stayed. I endured trauma no one could see. Even when people smiled at me, told me I looked beautiful, told me I would be a wonderful mother, I felt hollow inside. The words were meaningless because they did not touch the fear in my chest. They did not reach the nights I lay awake questioning everything about myself, wondering if I was enough, if I would survive, if I could face the responsibilities waiting for me. And yet, the darkest moments revealed the rawest truths. I discovered that strength is not always visible. It does not always roar. Sometimes it is the ability to sit with fear, to endure in silence, to cry and then wipe the tears away, to continue despite the terror. I learned that trauma does not always need witnesses. Sometimes it is lived quietly inside the mind, in the heart, in the body. And sometimes survival is measured not by the absence of fear, but by the willingness to move forward in spite of it. Even in my despair, there were small victories. The nights I survived without breaking completely. The moments my husband held me in silence, understanding more than words could express. The rare instances when I could laugh, even a little, at something trivial, forgetting fear for a fleeting moment. These moments were fragile, but they reminded me that trauma, though heavy, could coexist with love, hope, and connection. Pregnancy had changed me in ways no one could see. It had exposed the raw, fragile parts of myself. It had tested the limits of my endurance. It had brought me to the edge of my fear and left me there, trembling, wondering if I could step back into the light. But I did. I kept going. Because behind closed doors, I carried more than fear. I carried life. I carried love. I carried the quiet, unbreakable strength that only those who survive hidden trauma can know. And in the dark, in the silence, in the hidden corners of my heart, I found the courage to keep going, even when the world could not see. The closer the due date came, the heavier the air became around me. Every morning I woke with a pit in my stomach, a cold knot of fear that refused to loosen. It was no longer just the pregnancy. I was facing the unknown, the moment where preparation meets reality, where control ends and everything depends on chance, strength, and endurance. Fear became a constant companion. I feared the pain of labor. I feared complications. I feared losing control. I feared seeing my husband break under pressure. And deep down, I feared myself, my ability to survive this ordeal, my ability to become the mother I had dreamed of being. Even joy was tinged with anxiety. Every kick, every movement of the baby was a reminder that life had already begun and that the responsibility was now mine, unshakable and absolute. My body became a battlefield. The aches grew sharper, the movements more difficult, the nights longer. Every step was calculated, every action weighed against potential danger. I felt imprisoned in my own body, yet somehow it was the same body that was preparing to bring life into the world. Pain was no longer just physical, it was emotional, psychological, spiritual. It was a warning and a reminder. It was both mine and not mine. My husband and I moved together, yet apart. He tried to remain calm, tried to carry his silent weight alongside mine. Sometimes I could see the strain in his eyes, exhaustion, fear, and worry all layered together. We held hands, shared small smiles, exchanged words of reassurance, but there was an unspoken tension, the knowledge that soon everything would change. I feared what that change would demand. I feared whether we would survive it, together and individually. The waiting was unbearable. Days stretched endlessly. Nights were long and silent except for the constant reminders from within me, the tiny movements of life, each one demanding attention, each one echoing with possibility and peril. I lay awake, imagining every scenario, the birth I hoped for, the complications I feared, the life we could provide, the life we might not. My mind spun, unable to rest, unable to stop preparing for every possible disaster. And yet, there were moments of courage. I discovered strength I had never known, strength in my own body, in its endurance, strength in my mind, in its ability to face fear without giving in to panic, strength in my heart, in its capacity to hold love for someone not yet born while carrying fear for myself. Even my husband, silent but present, became a pillar I could cling to, even as he carried his own fear with equal weight. We were both terrified. We were both exhausted. And yet, we faced the unknown together. Anticipation became a double-edged sword. Every contraction, every strange feeling, every doctor's visit intensified both hope and fear. The world outside continued as usual, but inside me, time had slowed, each hour stretching into eternity. The unknown waited ahead, full of possibility and danger. And yet I could not stop. I could not escape. I had to face it. Pregnancy had taught me something essential, that fear is not weakness, that vulnerability is not failure, that trauma, anxiety, and doubt can coexist with love, hope, and courage. I would face this birth carrying everything. I would carry my fears, I would carry my pain, I would carry my hope, I would carry my love. Because life demanded it, because the child inside me deserved it, because in the quiet spaces between fear and anticipation, I had discovered a courage that could not be measured, only lived. The unknown was terrifying, but it was also where life began. And as I drew a shaky breath and felt the first stirrings of labor, I realized that survival had already begun long before the child entered the world. Pregnancy had broken me, reshaped me, and revealed the unthinkable strength I carried within me. The birth was coming, and I would meet it. Trembling, terrified, and ready. The closer the due date came, the heavier the world felt. Every morning I woke with a pit in my stomach, a cold, gnawing anxiety that no amount of preparation could soothe. It was no longer just about carrying a child. It was about stepping into a threshold I could not fully imagine, a threshold where everything I had known, everything I had prepared for, would meet reality. Fear lived in every fiber of me. I feared the pain of labor, the stretching, the tearing, the rawness I had only read about but could never truly understand until I felt it. I feared complications, the suddenness of danger, the fragility of life itself. I feared my own body, the way it might fail me when I needed it most. And unspoken but ever present, I feared the unknown in my husband's eyes. Would he break under pressure, or would he crumble silently, the way he sometimes did in quieter moments? Even joy became laced with anxiety. Every kick, every movement of the baby was a reminder that life had already begun, and that the responsibility was now mine, unshakable and absolute. My body became a battlefield. The aches grew sharper, the movements more difficult, the nights longer. Every step was calculated, every action weighed against potential danger. I felt imprisoned in my own body, yet somehow it was the same body that was preparing to bring life into the world. Pain was no longer just physical. It was emotional, psychological, spiritual. It was a warning and a reminder. It was both mine and not mine. My husband and I moved together yet apart. He tried to remain calm, tried to carry his silent weight alongside mine. Sometimes I could see the strain in his eyes, exhaustion, fear, and worry all layered together. We held hands, shared small smiles, exchanged words of reassurance, but there was an unspoken tension, the knowledge that soon everything would change. I feared what that change would demand. I feared whether we would survive it, together and individually. The waiting was unbearable. Days stretched endlessly. Nights were long and silent except for the constant reminders from within me, the tiny movements of life, each one demanding attention, each one echoing with possibility and peril. I lay awake, imagining every scenario, the birth I hoped for, the complications I feared, the life we could provide, the life we might not. My mind spun, unable to rest, unable to stop preparing for every possible disaster. And yet, there were moments of courage. I discovered strength I had never known, strength in my own body, in its endurance, strength in my mind, in its ability to face fear without giving in to panic, strength in my heart, in its capacity to hold love for someone not yet born while carrying fear for myself. Even my husband, silent but present, became a pillar I could cling to, even as he carried his own fear with equal weight. We were both terrified. We were both exhausted. And yet, we faced the unknown together. Anticipation became a double-edged sword. Every contraction, every strange feeling, every doctor's visit intensified both hope and fear. The world outside continued as usual, but inside me, time had slowed, each hour stretching into eternity. The unknown waited ahead, full of possibility and danger. And yet I could not stop. I could not escape. I had to face it. Pregnancy had taught me something essential, that fear is not weakness, that vulnerability is not failure, that trauma, anxiety, and doubt can coexist with love, hope, and courage. I would face this birth carrying everything. I would carry my fears, I would carry my pain, I would carry my hope, I would carry my love. Because life demanded it, because the child inside me deserved it, because in the quiet spaces between fear and anticipation, I had discovered a courage that could not be measured, only lived. The unknown was terrifying, but it was also where life began, and as I drew a shaky breath and felt the first stirrings of labor, I realized that survival had already begun long before the child entered the world. Pregnancy had broken me, reshaped me, and revealed the unthinkable strength I carried within me. The birth was coming, and I would meet it. Trembling, terrified, and ready. The world felt different after the birth. I had survived the storm, but nothing felt easy. My body was no longer my own, wounded, swollen, and aching. Every movement brought reminders of what I had endured. Every glance in the mirror showed me a stranger, someone both fragile and indestructible. The baby was beautiful and terrifying. I had imagined this moment countless times, but the reality was overwhelming. Tiny hands, tiny feet, and a life so dependent on me that I felt both awe and terror at once. I wanted to hold it forever, to protect it from everything, and yet I felt unprepared, unsure if I could meet every need, every cry, every demand. Even the act of feeding was a battle. Every tear that slipped from the baby's eyes pierced me like a knife. Every restless night reminded me that love was no longer theoretical. It was raw, relentless, and unending. Exhaustion became a shadow I could not shake. I had barely slept since labor. Nights blurred into days. My mind screamed for rest, but there was no rest for a mother. Each cry pulled me from the edge of sleep. Each movement demanded attention. My body ached in ways I didn't know possible, and my heart felt stretched across invisible lines of responsibility, worry, and love. And yet, I kept going. I had to. The trauma of pregnancy followed me home. Memories of fear, isolation, and anxiety lingered. I flinched at sudden sounds. I panicked when the baby's breathing changed even slightly. My body remembered the nights I cried alone, the fear that clawed at me when I imagined what could go wrong. Sometimes I would break down quietly, collapsing onto the bed while the baby slept beside me, tears streaming down my face. My husband would come and hold me, his presence a lifeline, and for a brief moment the weight lifted, but it always returned. Trauma leaves traces that no birth can erase. Love became a strange, piercing force. I loved this tiny life more than I could have imagined, and yet the intensity of that love brought fear, guilt, and exhaustion. I questioned myself constantly. Am I enough? Am I doing it right? Am I failing? Every decision, every movement, every sound seemed monumental. I realized that motherhood was not just caring for the child, it was carrying the weight of your own fear, trauma, and expectations while learning to bend without breaking. My husband and I began to understand each other differently. The silent support, the small gestures of presence, the late-night conversations and whispers, they all became more vital than ever. We were no longer just partners in life, we were guardians in the storm. His exhaustion mirrored mine, yet together we discovered a new rhythm. Even in our fragility, there was strength. Amid pain and fear, there was hope. Every tiny smile from the baby felt like a miracle. Every small milestone, a burp, a yawn, a grasp of my finger, was proof that we could survive this chaos. Every quiet moment of connection reminded me that trauma and love could coexist, that fear and courage could coexist, that exhaustion and hope could coexist. Motherhood was nothing like I had imagined. It was harder, darker, messier, but it was also more beautiful than I could have imagined. Pregnancy and birth had tested me, reshaped me, broken me, and yet, through it all, it had made me stronger. I was no longer just a woman carrying a child. I was a survivor, a protector, a mother. And in the quiet moments, holding the tiny life I had nurtured through fear, trauma, and pain, I understood something profound. Love is not just an emotion, it is endurance, it is sacrifice, it is surviving the storm, even when the storm feels endless. Even when the world expects perfection, even when fear and trauma linger, love and hope remain. The storm had passed, or at least the part that was visible, but I knew the echoes would remain. Pregnancy, birth, and the first days of motherhood had left marks on my body, my mind, and my heart. Marks that no one could see, but I could feel with every breath, every heartbeat, every thought. I had survived more than I imagined. The nights of fear, the silent tears, the arguments with my husband, the relentless expectations from the world, they had tested me to the edge. And yet, I was still standing. My body was tired, my mind weary, but my spirit carried something that fear could not touch: resilience. I realized that survival does not mean the absence of fear or trauma. It means continuing despite it. It means finding light in darkness, hope in despair, and love in moments that feel unbearable. Love had changed. Not the simple, easy kind of love I had imagined in fairy tales or movies. No, this was love forged in pressure, molded in anxiety, tested by expectation, and strengthened by trauma.
And there you have it, a journey through fear, pain, and the unyielding strength of the human heart. As a doctor, I have witnessed many stories of motherhood, but few carry the raw honesty and courage we just heard. Carol's experience reminds us that pregnancy is not only about joy and expectation, it is about vulnerability, resilience, and the quiet battles that often go unseen. Her story is a testament to the power of speaking our truths, of acknowledging fear, and of finding strength even in the darkest moments. It is a reminder that behind every expectant mother is a story worth hearing, a journey worth honoring, and a life filled with courage that cannot be measured by any chart or scan. As you reflect on this story, I invite you to carry it with you, to understand, to empathize, and to recognize that the journey of motherhood is as much about the heart as it is about the body. Every fear faced, every tear shed, and every triumph earned shapes a story that inspires, heals, and connects us all. Thank you for joining me today and for opening your hearts to a story that is real, profound, and unforgettable. Remember, behind every life that begins, there is a mother whose strength makes it possible. Once again, if you have not subscribed to this channel, leave whatever you're doing right now and like, share, subscribe, and comment on this channel to enable us get feedback from you and improve our communication and interaction with you as we prepares our subsequent episodes. Please press the subscription button now. Keep a date with me in Dr. Charlotte's Corner by subscribing and pressing the notification button to get immediate notification on our next episode, Pregnancy Fears and Trauma: Will My Husband Still Love My Looks After 2 to 3 Births? Keep a date with Dr. Charlotte's Corner on the coming episode. Stay tuned.